Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Jessie Haas. I'm the Senior National Director of the Therapy Animal Program at Pet Partners. And I want to welcome you to today's live, which is called Volunteering with Your Pet. This is an orientation to the Therapy Animal Program. It's definitely geared towards individuals who are just beginning to consider volunteering with their pet in their community, or people who are maybe halfway through the process. But if you are somebody who has been volunteering with us for a while, please feel free to hang out and use the comment box, comment on things that I'm saying, share your experiences. But really, this is more of an introductory orientation to Pet Partners and to our Therapy Animal Program. So again, my name is Jessie Haas. I'm pleased to be here with you all today. Before I dive into our content, always nice to know who's out there and listening. So if you could share maybe what kind of pet you have, whether it's a dog or a cat, a horse, a bunny, whatever it might be, let me know. Also, let me know where you're from. Also helpful to know if you're just starting this process, if you're somewhere in the middle, if you're already a volunteer. I just like to know who's listening. So I'm going to hop over to the comments and see who's here. So I've got my colleague Bree here from Reno with her bunny Theo. So she'll be handling some written comments as they come through. Actually, to that end, use the comment box liberally. Bree will either answer your question if it's something that's easy for her to answer, or I might verbalize a response to any questions or comments you have. I also see we've got Amy with Rosie, her golden. You're just getting started. Great. Glad to have you here, Amy. I didn't put my phone on silent. I apologize. So if you heard that ringing. We also got Leah from Arizona with Hazel, a 3-year-old Woodle from New Hampshire with Deborah. That's great. Jennifer from Anchorage, far away, but we do have a very active Pet Partners community in Alaska. So happy to have you, Jennifer. Sandy asked, is this on Zoom? Not right now. We're just here on Facebook. There will be a recording of this later, probably available also via Facebook. And we've got a giant Flemish rabbit. Great. From Ohio. Hi, Amanda. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let's go to our first slide. And how I'm going to start today in the first few slides is I'm going to let you know a little bit more about what therapy animal volunteerism looks and feels like. So where do you go with your pet when you're volunteering on behalf of Pet Partners? What do those visits in those places look like? I think that's always the most helpful way to start, because from there, when I get into kind of what are the program requirements, what are we looking for in you and your pet, you'll have a bit of a better understanding, I believe, of why we look for the things that we look for, because I've already let you know what therapy animal volunteerism looks like. The other thing I want to do right off the bat here is let you know that when I talk about a team, which I will do a few times throughout this presentation, I'm speaking of you and your pet. So one animal plus one handler creates a Pet Partners team. And we have about 7,000 teams in the United States visiting in all sorts of places. Some of those are listed up on your screen. These are places where therapy animals visit. This list is not exhaustive, but it's a really good representation of some of the most popular places where our teams visit. As you're thinking about joining Pet Partners or completing the process in order to become a volunteer, you may be thinking to yourself, well, where will I visit? And really, ultimately, that's going to be up to you and what is the best fit for you and your animal. So there are some therapy animal teams who really like quieter environments, slower paced. That might be a nice fit for an older animal or even a younger animal who might have more of a quieter personality. There's going to be other teams who really like lots of activity, lots of children, high energy individuals, and you might choose locations like that. So you'll learn more about your pet throughout this process, about you both as a team, and then you can select where you visit based on that. In terms of how you find places to visit, on our website, once you are a registered team, we have a visit opportunities directory. And so you can hop on, you can search by your zip code. There are literally thousands of opportunities where facilities advertise on our website saying, I'm a hospital in Minneapolis. I would like to have a team come every week, and you can reach out directly to that facility, let them know that you're registered, how you found their listing on our website, and make the connection that way. Other teams will work with a local group of Pet Partners volunteers. We have about 60 community partner groups throughout the United States. You do not have to join one of these. So if there isn't one in your area, that's totally okay. But if there is one in your area, this is a local group of Pet Partners volunteers. And oftentimes facilities will go to them and say, all right, this is our group in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And they'll let that group directly know about those visit opportunities, and then that group will distribute the opportunities to handlers in their area. Still, other handlers set up their own visits. Maybe you have a child in a school where you'd like to visit. You can contact the school. You can educate them about Pet Partners and make the connection that way. So lots of different ways to find places to visit. I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the most common. Let's take a look at the next slide. So in terms of what visits look like, a lot of Pet Partners visits are social in nature. And social sounds casual, and it certainly can feel casual, but it is an opportunity to brighten somebody's day, to reduce their isolation, to provide a distraction, to provide conversation, so they can still have a lot of impact. So imagine a scenario where a therapy animal team perhaps goes into a senior care facility. And for some residents in that facility, you may be the only visit they have that day or that week. So you can kind of get a sense of what the impact might be. So social visits can happen in a wide variety of different environments, but they are just an opportunity to converse. Other visits are more structured in nature. So we do have volunteers who partner with physical or occupational therapists, as an example. And in these types of situations, you as the volunteer therapy animal team would be working alongside a physical or occupational therapist who might have a client in session. Maybe that client or patient needs to work on their fine motor skills. A great way to do that would be to brush your cat if you have a therapy cat, right? So this is structured. It's working towards a goal that the physical therapist may have, and you are there to help them meet those goals as a volunteer. Lots of our teams visit in reading programs. Read with Me is our special initiative that any handler and their animal can participate in. Once you become a registered team, you simply sign up to be a part of the Read with Me program, and you can go out to schools, libraries, and other environments and have children read to your pet. You can see actually a picture example of that up on the screen. There is actually a lot of research supporting the effectiveness of animal-assisted therapy in reading or literacy situations. As you can imagine, for a lot of young readers, having an animal present is incredibly motivating for them. They are more motivated to practice. They are more motivated to read out loud. These all obviously lead to generally good outcomes. And a lot of children who may be shyer or just learning reading skills really do appreciate the non-judgmental nature of reading to animals. So it can feel like a very approachable way to practice their reading. Lots and lots of volunteers do reading programs. Stress breaks and having therapy animals present to help reduce people's stress. This is also really common, happens in a variety of locations. Airports is one example where our teams might visit with people experiencing travel-related stress. Universities and colleges, this is really common. They will host therapy animal teams during finals week or during the week that freshmen might be moving into their dorms. That can be very stressful for a young person to leave their home and family for the first time. So Pet Partners teams will be present to kind of bring some of those stress levels down. So just as with the last slide, this is just a small sample of the types of visits our teams do, but I did want to give you a sense of not only where people visit with their pets, but also what those visits look like and what the goals of those visits are. So we're going to go to the next slide. I know that we have a rabbit team here today. I'm scrolling through and it looks like most others are canines. Yes, the assumption is often that therapy pets are always dogs, and they do make up about 94% of our teams at Pet Partners, but we do welcome all of the other species on this list. Not only do we welcome them, we value them very, very much. And that's because there are situations where the unique skills or presence of a rabbit, for example, is very much what is needed or wanted as opposed to a dog. So we love the diversity of our species. We are very proud of being one of the only registries to register animals outside of dogs, cats, and horses. So just wanted to make sure everybody knows we are very welcoming to non-dogs as well, but of course love our canine friends as ever. So let's go to the next slide. So now you know where teams visit, what those visits look like, the animals involved in those visits. So I want to talk a little bit about the commitment when you become a Pet Partners volunteer. We really like to emphasize that the commitment is up to you as a volunteer. There are no minimum number of hours that you have to volunteer on a weekly, monthly, or yearly basis. You get to decide. Very, very common for our volunteers to visit once or twice a month. I would say that's probably the most typical schedule setup, although there are people who visit every week or visit twice a week. There are some volunteers who only visit at one facility. They go there twice a month, every other week. That's it. That's the facility they go to. Other volunteers will visit multiple facilities. So maybe once a month on Mondays, they go to a local school. Once a month on Saturdays, they visit at a library, and maybe twice a month, they go to the local hospital. So that is really up to you. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, you get to arrange visits yourself. We give you some tools to do that, but it's between you and the facility to determine a schedule that works for you based on your availability, your interest, your time, your energy. Also, once again, it'll depend on your animal. For some animals, they love, let me backtrack. All of our therapy animals really love visiting. For some, they want to do it all the time. For others, it's more something that fits into like their schedule as an animal on a less frequent basis. So you'll want to take that into account as well. Whenever you're considering, how often do I want to visit, or how much do I want to commit to, it is important to think about the fact that both before and after a therapy animal visit, there are some time commitments on your part. On the front end, you want to make sure that you're leaving time to groom your animal. That's very important before you go into any setting so that they are clean and fresh. That also helps us reduce any hygiene issues or infection issues. Grooming helps with all of those things, so you'll have to build that in. After a visit, most animals are tired. Even animals who love volunteering and have so much energy also can be very tired after a visit. So when you're thinking about your visit day and when you're going, probably not the best idea in most cases to take your dog to the dog park or go to doggy daycare for the day. It's usually some quiet time after a visit. So that's something you'll want to keep in mind as you're determining what your commitment looks like. We can go to the next slide. I am just going to pop over to the comments though and make sure I haven't missed any questions thus far, which you can drop into the comments anytime you want. So just more people introducing themselves. Great. Okay. I haven't missed any questions, but like I said, feel free to ask me anything. So at this point, now that you understand the therapy animal program a little bit better, I want to talk about what are the requirements or the eligibility considerations to join the program. So in terms of age, pocket pets need to be at least 6 months old. All other animals need to be at least 1 year old. So there's a little bit of species differentiation there. When I say pocket pets, by the way, I mean rabbits, guinea pigs, and rats specifically. So they can be a little bit younger. All other animals need to be over a year. Any animal registering with Pet Partners needs to have lived in your home for at least 6 months. The only exception to that is birds, which is 1 year. The reason we have this requirement in place is because the bond between handler and animal in the team is so important for safety and effectiveness throughout your time as a Pet Partners volunteer. When you're out in hospitals or airports or schools visiting, that bond is incredibly important. So we want to make sure that's established before you're registered. Therefore, we want the animal to have lived with you for some amount of time. All animals must be reliably house trained. No waste collection devices are allowed for either indoor or outdoor visits. The only exception to that is flight suits for birds, but otherwise all species do need to be house trained. All animals need to be leash trained. Again, that also applies to non-canines. So you'll want to make sure that your animal is leash trained or used to a leash. And obviously for those of us who have dogs, that's very common and normal. For other species, that's just something we want to make sure people understand, that just because you have a smaller animal doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be leashed. Pet partners, animals cannot be fed a raw protein diet. This is for infection prevention and control reasons. Animals cannot have a history of aggression of any type towards people or other animals, because even though you're primarily going to be interacting with human beings when you're out on a visit, it is very common for animals to encounter other animals, right? It could be an assistance animal, it could be somebody's personal pet. As more and more places become dog friendly, it isn't uncommon to see dogs in a lot of different settings. So we want to make sure that our therapy animals do not react to other animals or show any aggression to them of any type. We do want therapy animals to be healthy, but I want to be really clear that there are a lot of animals involved in our program that do have chronic health issues that might be managed by a medication. As long as it's a health issue that is under control, doesn't make your animal uncomfortable, doesn't increase its discomfort going out in public, the animal can still participate. We also have animals who do have disabilities. So we have animals who may have hearing impairment or sight impairment, or who may have had a limb amputated. Those animals are also all eligible to participate, provided they can pass our evaluation and again, be comfortable in a therapy animal visit situation. My recommendation always is, if your animal has a disability or if your animal has a long-term or chronic health issue, please reach out to us early on in the process, and we can help ensure that whatever your animal might be experiencing is something that doesn't disallow them from participating in the program. The same thing goes for medications. There are a few medications, such as antifungals, that or steroids, that are not allowed when participating in the program. So if your animal were to be on an antifungal for a short period of time, that's okay. You just wouldn't visit while your animal is on that course of treatment. But if your animal is on a course of treatment that is lifelong, we just want to make sure that the medication they are on does not disallow participation in the program. So just reach out to us on our website. On every single page, we have a contact us button. Let us know what's going on. We'd be happy to answer your questions. And then obedience skills is something that's required for eligibility, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit later, but I thought I would flag it here. We can go to the next slide. Okay, I did see there was a question here, and Bree already answered it, but just in case others are curious, Gary asked, can you register both of your animals with pet partners? Yes, you sure can. We have lots of people who are registered with more than one animal. We actually have lots of people registered with more than one species. But just a couple important points on that. We would treat you as two separate teams. So if I was registered with my dog, JJ, Jesse and JJ are one team. If I was registered with my other dog, Rhodey, then Jesse and Rhodey are also one team. So we definitely treat you as separate teams. You will go through the evaluation as separate teams. And you can't visit with more than one animal at a time. So I, Jesse, cannot go out with both Rhodey and JJ at the same time. You visit with one animal at a time. So I just wanted to make that clarification for those of you who may be interested in doing that. Amanda, I see a question here that says, so do they go there and you guys will assist? I'm not quite sure what that's in relation to. So I'm going to keep going, but if you want to clarify your question, I'm happy to circle back to it. So we've gotten eligibility requirements out of the way. Those are kind of the nuts and bolts basic requirements. But I want to move on to talk a little bit about what makes a therapy animal successful. Like, what are some of the kind of soft skills or things that you're looking for in a therapy animal? So they are people-oriented, they are sociable, and they are friendly, of course. But a really important thing to point out here is that they need to be all of those things with strangers as well, and with a wide variety of strangers. So I know, for example, I've had dogs in the past who are so friendly and sociable with my family, friendly and sociable with the neighborhood, friendly and sociable with anybody that they see regularly, but we're maybe quite distant from a brand new stranger in certain situations. That kind of pet generally isn't going to be a successful therapy animal because you see strangers over and over and over again. Even if you go to the same facility, the clients or the patients or the students are going to change over time. So you want them to be able to interact in a friendly way with a wide variety of people. Of course, they need to have good basic obedience skills. I want to be really clear that we're not looking for like obedient stars, animals who could compete in obedience. What we are looking for is species-specific obedience skills that allow your animal to be reliable and to respond to your cues when on a visit. So for a dog, this is going to look like sit, stay, down, come when called, right? So that when you're on a visit and maybe somebody really wants to pet your animal and would prefer to pet your animal when your animal's sitting or laying down, some people really prefer that, you can put them into a sit and you know that they will reliably follow that command. Really important emphasis here, though, is that obedience skills also need to be reliable when the animal is distracted. So those of you with dogs who have done a lot of training courses, you might recall moments where your animal does a great job doing it when you're at home or when they're in the training facility, but suddenly you take them to a park and there's squirrels and there's birds and there's bikes. Now suddenly your animal doesn't want to sit, even though they did it 100 times before in other environments. A therapy animal situation when you're out visiting is going to be inherently distracting. And our evaluation, which is required before you register, and we'll talk about in just a moment, is going to purposefully introduce to your animal a lot of distractions to determine if your animal can still navigate various situations even when there are distractions. So for those of you obviously who are new and you're preparing to become a therapy animal team, make sure you're practicing your obedience skills with lots of distractions around. Of course, they need to remain calm and comfortable being touched by others. I, I do always like to clarify this though by saying that even therapy animals, even our most experienced animals who are comfortable in so many different settings, there are going to be moments or people that they want to withdraw from. And that's okay. They all have individual personalities. They're all unique. They're allowed to sometimes say, like, I don't really want to interact with that person. Or I'm not really liking this room over here. It doesn't feel safe to me. It's okay for the animal to communicate that to you. And again, that's where the bond comes in, where you can understand your animal giving you that cue because you know them and you have that bond. That's okay. What we're looking for, again, is for them to be calm, comfortable, people-oriented, sociable in the majority of situations. So we can go to the next slide. So it's not all about the animal end of the leash. We all love to focus on the animals. What does my animal need to do? I think my animal would be great for therapy, animal volunteerism, but the human end of the leash is half of the team. And a lot of us at Pet Partners would actually argue perhaps the slightly more important half of the team if you had to choose one half to be more important, when in reality, both are so important. But handling skills, um, are often underrated in this field. And so I want to talk about what makes a successful handler. Of course, you also need to be friendly, professional, and polite with a wide variety of people. You are going to encounter people at times who maybe interact with you in a way that you don't prefer, and you need to remain friendly, professional, and polite. You can't always predict other people's behaviors, especially in certain settings. So we're looking for that in our handlers. We want to make sure our handlers can predict and redirect your animal's behavior. So an example of this is maybe you're walking into a hospital room and maybe the patient is eating or has a bowl of candy or a snack on their bedside table. If you know your animal is food motivated and they always aren't their best selves when there's food around, can you predict that? Do you know how to handle that? Can you say to the person, "Oh, we'll come back when you're done eating," or do you mind if I set this bowl up or away or out of sight from my animal? Those kinds of predictions and redirections are incredibly important. Handlers also need to ensure their animal's well-being at all times. We call that YAYABA, which is an acronym for You Are Your Animal's Best Advocate. As a handler, your primary responsibility is not to the people you are visiting. Your primary responsibility is to your pet. So if you have a situation where your animal is feeling uncomfortable, they're being petted in a way that they really don't like to be petted, you can sense their stress. We are looking for handlers who can pick that up right away, proactively intervene, remove their animal from the situation, or even redirect the human being who might be interacting with your animal. These are incredibly important skills because as much as your animal might want to be there, it's also really your choice as the human being. You get to decide where you go, when you go, who you're interacting with. So you need to advocate for your animal. That's a responsibility you've taken on. And a lot of times handlers can get kind of swept up in wanting to do the right thing for the people they're visiting. But really, again, your primary responsibility is to your pet and being able to navigate those interactions. Um, and that is so important for safety when you're out visiting with your pet. And of course, successful handlers need to follow all pet partners' policies and procedures. You need to know those very, very well. For example, one policy is you can't visit for more than 2 hours a day. You need to follow that policy. You always need to have your animal leashed. That's another policy. You must follow that at all times. And so that's a little bit about what we're looking for in handlers and what our expectations are for you. Let's go to the next slide. So we're coming to the end here, and it's now time to talk about the process you go through to become a team. For those of you who are not yet teams, I have some steps listed up on the screen. There are a few more steps beyond these 4. Things like entering your biographical information, things like telling us what programs you want to participate in, like Read With Me. But these are really the 4 steps that most people have questions about. For example, step 3 is where your veterinarian would give you a form that you submit to us. This is where we can check and make sure your animal is healthy. There's also lots of questions about step 1, how do I get started? You create an account online, you launch your registration. Maybe Bree can drop in a link to the volunteer section of our website where you can begin a account if you haven't yet. If anybody on this call hasn't, an account is free. Set it up. It allows you to start exploring parts of our website that are available even for in-progress handlers, those who aren't yet registered. So these are really the 4 steps that take some time and intention and thought. But the 2 I'm going to focus on for my last few minutes here are step 2 and 4. So your handler training as well as your team evaluation with your pet. So let's go to the next slide and talk about handler training. So you can take the handler training in person or online. I will be very transparent that in-person therapy animal handler courses, excuse me one second. I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold here. It is more difficult to find in-person options because these are taught by licensed instructors, and we don't have licensed instructors in every town across America. So you may not be able to find an in-person option in your community, but we do have the course available online. When you begin an account and start your registration with us, one of the steps is handler training. And right from there, you are able to go look and see if there's the course available in your community, or you can sign up for the online option. There are pros and cons to both. It sort of depends on your learning style. I think obviously an advantage of taking the course in person is that you get to meet other people who are at the same point in the process that you are. There are a lot of really interesting discussions that are both informal and formal that happen. You get a chance to meet an instructor who has a lot of experience as a pet partners team and a volunteer leader. So there can be a lot of advantages to that. On the other hand, the online course, you can do at your own pace. You can chunk it out and do an hour here and an hour there. It can be very convenient. Also, the content is something you can come back to. If you want to watch a section twice, you can do that. So pros and cons. With the handlers course, this is very much about the human end of the leash. So even if you take this in person, you do not bring your animal to the course. It is all about some of the things that I already talked about. How do you be a proactive handler? How do you be your animal's best advocate? How do you navigate difficult interactions with clients or patients or students? How do you make sure that everybody stays safe? What do you do in case of an emergency? So it's all about you as the human end of the leash. Naturally, I get questions at this point of, well, what's required for training for my animal? There is no required training for your animal. There are a couple of reasons for that. So first of all, we welcome 9 different species. Our rabbit handler on the call probably knows, very difficult to find rabbit training courses in your community. So if we required a certain type of course, we would of course be creating barriers for those species that we want to be able to participate in our program. The other reason, even speaking of canines who have lots of formal classes available to them, animals come to us at various different times in their journey. Sometimes we have a 6 or 7 or 8 or 9-year-old dog join the program. They've already done courses and it's years ago, right? And so we don't want to make them go back and do training that they've already done. So our goal really with the handler training is, again, to make you safe and effective, help you understand what visits look like, but also after taking the course, you'll have a really good sense of what it is that, again, we're looking for in animals. And you are able to then decide how you want to train your pet. Maybe it's at home, maybe it's in a formal class, but that's really up to you. So that's all I'm going to say about the handler training. If you have questions, you certainly can drop in comments, but let's go to the next slide and talk about evaluations. So the evaluation is where a licensed evaluator with pet partners meets with a team, usually via an event, an evaluation event where they might be evaluating 6 or 7 or 8 teams that day, but you go one by one, so you're not in a room with multiple other pet partners teams during your evaluation. This varies a little bit from the CGC or other types of obedience style things where you might have more than one team in a room at a time. With pet partners, it's the evaluator together with just the team. The only other people in the room are the evaluation assistants. These are 3 individuals without their animals who are helping the evaluator administer some different exercises. The evaluation takes from 35 to 45 minutes. It just depends on how quickly you move, how quickly the evaluator moves, so it can be anywhere in that time frame. And the first half of the evaluation is what we call the skills portion. This is where you will be generally performing species appropriate obedience exercises. So again, sit, stay, things like that. In the second half is where we introduce aptitude exercises. And these are exercises that are meant to simulate a therapy animal situation. So there will be a time where all of the assistants come around your animal and pet or crowd around it, right? That is going to be something that you are likely to see at a therapy animal visit where people are excited to see your pet. Everybody wants to come at the same time. So we first of all want to see how your animal responds to that, but we also want to see how you as the handler respond to that. So you might say, oh, yes, of course, Fluffy would love to be pet. Could we maybe do this one at a time? Or could you stand on this side of Fluffy and you can stand on this side of Fluffy, right? So we're looking for you to be able to manage the interactions. Another example of an aptitude exercise is that we will make a loud noise. Again, we want to see how your animal responds, but we also want to see how you support your animal through something that might startle them. It's okay for an animal to be startled, but how do you as a handler provide comfort to your animal when they might have been startled or experiencing a little bit of stress from the noise? Really important for me to point out here that the evaluation score and ultimately passing, 50% handler, 50% animal. So your animal could do a perfect job, but if you as a handler are not providing them support, if you're not proactively handling, if you're not advocating for them, you may not pass the evaluation. So you'll hear that theme again and again with pet partners. You probably are already picking up on it from my presentation today. The human end of the leash is just as important as the animal, and you'll see that in the evaluation as well. So we're going to go to the next slide. And I do see some comments coming in, and I'm almost done here, so I'm going to loop back and get those at the end. I just wanted to let you know some of the benefits of registering with Pet Partners. So if you complete the course, you complete the evaluation, all is good. You are now registered. What are some things that you get? I'll let you read most of these. The only one I really want to talk about is the very first one. All of our registered teams are covered by a general liability insurance policy. This is incredibly important. The vast majority of facilities would not allow a person with their pet to come in, even a therapy animal, if they were not insured. And so that is something that you get as part of your registration. And there's a certificate and all of that. So when you're ready to go out to facilities, we make that certificate available to you, and you can rest assured that you are covered. So I'm going to end there. I'm going to loop to these questions, keep them coming in. So Deb, I see that you have a question about the farmer's dog food. I believe I've heard of that one. I don't know for sure. That is a great question to submit to me. My email's up there, or you can use the contact us. I would have to look into that particular food. I don't want to answer that question without knowing exactly what it is. Alicia asked, how do you evaluate how your dog interacts with other animals if the evaluation is done individually? That's a great question. So there is one exercise in the evaluation called the neutral dog exercise. This comes in the aptitude portion. This is something all animals, regardless of species, have to go through. So you and your pet will pass close by to another dog, and that is where we will assess your animal's ability to manage themselves around other animals. So we call it neutral dog because we select an animal that is generally neutral, and then we would want your animal to be generally neutral towards the dog as well. So that's a great question, Alicia. Thank you. So Deb asked, can you register with your puppy who's only 4 months old, or should I wait? No, your animal, a dog, has to be at least 1 year old before you can register. What you can do, Deb, is you can begin the process. You can start an account now. You can start a registration now. You can even take the required coursework now. You simply cannot sign up for an evaluation until your animal has turned a year old. Now, what you can do is when your animal is 10 months old and you see an evaluation 2 months down the road, you can snag that spot. You just cannot actually show up and do the evaluation until your dog is 1 year old. How much does the evaluation cost and how many times can you take it? Great question, Carolyn. So the evaluation is offered by local volunteer leaders, evaluators in your community. They cannot make a profit off of offering these evaluations because they are volunteers. They may have some costs associated with holding the event. So if there is a space rental fee at the church basement where they're holding the evaluation, or the community room at the library, and they have to pay a fee, they are allowed to pass those costs on to the handler. So if they are paying a $200 fee for, an 8-hour event, right? They could pass those costs on to the 8 or 10 teams that are joining. So you might have a cost, you might not. It depends on which evaluation you sign up for, just because each is uniquely run by an evaluator. Many of our evaluations are totally free. Many are very low cost, $12 to $15, but there are a few that can push in that $20 or $25 range because the evaluator themselves has a cost. They do their best to find free spaces, but it's getting harder and harder for them to find free spaces in which to hold these evaluations. In terms of how many times you can take it, this is a great question as well, and I want to provide some background. So about 35 or 40% of first-time teams going through the evaluation will receive what's called a not ready score, which means you're just not ready that day. You didn't show the appropriate skills or aptitudes that day, but you come back and try again. And you can try as many times as you want. Most people who get a not ready that first time will pass right away the second time. If you receive a not ready score, your evaluator will sit down with you and talk with you about it. They will tell you, you just made a simple mistake and you might be ready to evaluate as soon as the next weekend. Other ones, they might say, the animal received a not ready because they were just way too exuberant you might want to wait 3 or 4 months, work on your ability to remain calm or the animal's ability to remain calm during the evaluation. So the evaluator will give you some recommendations, but you are absolutely welcome to try again. Now that 30 or 40% not ready rate for a first team might seem like a lot, but a lot of it is really, for a lot of teams, quite avoidable. Again, just thinking like, oh, my animal's pretty good at the lay. Maybe I can get him to lay down during the evaluation, and then he doesn't lay down. My biggest recommendation is really just to understand the skills that you need and work on them before you sign up for an event. And then most likely you can avoid that not ready score altogether. It's usually handlers maybe rolling the dice a little bit before their animal is quite ready to go, or some of the not readies are because of handler behavior, not advocating for your animal. One of the biggest mistakes we see is handlers think I should step back and let the evaluator assess my dog. And so they'll just kind of stand back. We don't want that. We want handlers in there with their animals, being a teammate to their animal throughout. Like, that is the best thing you can do. So we do see a lot of first-time teams. They think it's like a training class where you can't do certain things, but we're looking for that warm interaction between you and your animal as well. So Carolyn asks, is there a list on your website of the behaviors commands expected of your animal? Yes. So start an account, and when you get into your account, there's a big brown box that says resources. Go there, click on resources. You can type in your species. So if you have a rabbit, type in rabbit, canine, and you can see the entire evaluation overview. So you can get a sense of what does each exercise look like, but your handler course will also do that. And your handler course will have links to videos as well. So we definitely prepare you to understand what is happening in the evaluation. In my opinion, I think a lot of what happens is handlers rightly believe, like, my animal is awesome. They're so friendly. Of course they're cut out for this work. And they kind of see the evaluation as maybe a rubber stamp. But our evaluators, I don't want to say they're regimented, but they follow a very strict scoring guideline. And so we just want handlers to be prepared that, like, this is exactly what they're looking for. If you know that going into it, you have a very good chance of passing. Gary asks, can you use treats to get them to lay down? No, you cannot. So no treats are allowed during the evaluation, except for the very last exercise, which is actually giving your animal a treat. You can choose to allow the evaluator to give them a treat, or you can decline the treat. So some animals can be a little bit exuberant about food, and they can say, nope, I don't want you to give my pet a treat. All that would mean is that during a visit, you don't allow people to give your pets treats. But that's the only time that food is introduced during the evaluation. So you can't use things to kind of coax them into a cue. So if you're asking about rabbits, Amanda, and what they need to do during an evaluation, again, the entire evaluation overview for rabbits is available once you have an account set up and you search resources. I think that's what you're asking about. And yes, often our rabbits will use either strollers or baskets or something else to carry. We still require them to be on a leash. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but we do really have a lot of information for our less common species in our resource library, because we know that you have a lot, maybe more specific questions about what does this all mean for your particular pet. So I really encourage you to go type in rabbit, and you'll see evaluation overview, rabbit score sheets. You'll see videos specifically on how people volunteer with their rabbits. So that's where I would direct you. I know I have gone much longer than I normally go with these things. I've gone 45 minutes. So I am going to wrap up. If you have additional questions, please use the contact information on your screen. I'd be happy to help you out. I so appreciate all of you being here, listening to me talk about the program that I love so much, and a program that I hope you will join and learn to love as well. So thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Bye now.